That was a hell of a Super Bowl. That was ultimately not the outcome I wanted. I predicted that the Chiefs would win, but I really, really, really wanted the 49ers to win. Mostly just because I wanted proof of concept for the Texans. You know, you want to be sure, hey, yeah, this blueprint works. Kyle Shanahan certainly won't lose in 3 Super Bowls in which he held a double-digit lead. Now, certainly that won't happen. But it was close. It was as close as it could have been while still getting a loss. And I'm happy for Andy Reid, and I'm angry about every single other Chief. I grew to really despise the Chiefs over the course of that game.
Yeah. I guess my biggest takeaway, I mean, there's so much stuff to dig into from this game. I guess as long as we're starting out here, like the biggest thing, if we were talking, you and I talked about, everybody talked about storylines going into this game and, what it means for all the legacies, Mahomes and Reid and Shanahan, and I think all the potential effects on legacy that we talked about last week came to fruition in this game. And the biggest one to me is like now we are officially living in the Brady 2.0 era here with Mahomes. Now it's 3 Super Bowls in 5 years, and it's not just that he's won 3 Super Bowls, Seth. It was the kind of inevitability feeling that I had, at least going into over. Like once the Chiefs got their legs under them in that game and it turned into kind of a back and forth thing between the two teams.
Yeah.
Especially in overtime when the Niners weren't able to cash in on getting deep into the red zone and they only kicked a field goal. You're like, all right, this is what happens when great ones win Super Bowls. And add to it the little quirky ass things like a punt bouncing off somebody's leg on the Niners and gift wrapping a touchdown to the Chiefs when they were struggling offensively in that game. That's my feeling on it, is like, okay, this had a lot of the same traits of a game that we saw when Brady was winning all those close Super Bowls.
I never felt the inevitability there. I always I felt like the Chiefs were uncharacteristically lacking composure. They were making a lot of stupid mistakes themselves.
Sure.
And I think the biggest mistake in the entire game was probably when the 49ers all out blitzed Pat Mahomes on the final drive there. I think other than that, they were coming up and still making it really hard on Mahomes offensively. The flukish, I'll tell you what, where the 49ers returner, where I think everybody went from 10 seconds of asking why was he so stupid to immediately thinking like, oh gosh, yeah,
sorry
okay,
about that.
Heads up play. You tried to catch it off the carom of your own teammate's foot. That I thought that given the injuries that the 49ers sustained in the game, that was I don't want to call it a heroic effort, obviously, because they lost. But I thought they did a really good job of making it difficult on the Chiefs. And it just ultimately, Pat Mahomes does it the way the way that you would have drawn it up on a final play in overtime. But this was just so clearly not the same Chiefs team as the last couple Super Bowl victories, which maybe makes it that much more impressive, the fact that they had to be so scrappy in winning this one.
No, that's and I thought that too. I thought there was a time going into the playoffs where many Texan fans, of all the scenarios the Texans could have had in the first round of the postseason, there were a lot of Texan fans that would have rather traveled to Kansas City to play the Chiefs than play the Browns at home. 3 weeks ago, that was a thing. Remember that? There were as many Texan fans who wanted to play the Chiefs in the wild card round as wanted to play the Browns at home, which is crazy to think, because now I'm looking at the TV in our studio here, and there's Mahomes holding up the Lombardi Trophy. And I guess just to clarify my inevitability, it wasn't inevitability throughout the entire game at all. I thought the 49ers, by and large, played a really, really good game. It was in overtime for me. Like, once they got it to overtime, think about that. The Niners take a 19-16 lead, but they leave Mahomes with plenty of time on the clock and 2 timeouts. Like, to me, that was where the inevitability started to kick in for me, Seth, was when the Niners had the ball at about the Chiefs' 35-yard line. They had a 3rd and 4, and not only did they not convert, but they threw an incomplete pass. So now Mahomes has a 2-minute drill with 2 timeouts to go at least get the thing to overtime. And I was a little surprised they didn't run one more play down there, the Chiefs, when they had a chance to end it in regulation. They still had 6 seconds left on the clock. to run a play down there. Instead, they kick the field goal and go to overtime.
Yeah. I think the only reason you were surprised there was because Romo was flip-flopping and bebopping all over the place on the clock management.
I'm insulted that you think somehow Romo crept into my thinking on anything at all. Let me just say that right off the top.
He went from thinking that, you could probably run 17 plays in these last 9 seconds to they added a second. Good, because I was worried.
Yeah.
I didn't think you could run. I don't know. You got to have that extra second.
Yeah, we'll get to Romo. But I thought when the door was left open for Mahomes to actually get the ball in regulation and send it to overtime, and then when the Niners, who were driving the ball impressively right out of the chute in overtime, stalled down there deep in the red zone, I said, okay, well, Mahomes is the guy that if you leave openings for like that, he's going to take advantage of it, and he did. That was my feeling in overtime. When the Niners didn't score a touchdown in overtime and they kicked the field goal, I said, this is how it goes. And Mahomes winds up with 333 yards passing. And to me, the bigger thing was the 66 yards rushing that he had. He had some massive, massive plays with his legs that were just got so well designed. Like the same exact play they ran in the first half and they ran in overtime. That little, the little bootleg to the right there.
Yeah.
He was the best player on the field last night.
They had held him to in the final 2 drives, and obviously the time factored into it there at the end of regulation, but they held him to 2 field goals, but they were long. Like the Chiefs were driving in regulation.
Yeah.
They had a 12-play field goal drive. Then the Chiefs had an 11-play field goal drive. And I think a lot of people were curious about why the 49ers would choose to be on offense first, given that in overtime, with both teams having a chance to possess the ball, that it seems like, okay, wouldn't you like to know whether you need a field goal or a touchdown? I think at that point it was simply because of those 2 drives that the Chiefs had. Their final 2 drives were long drives. The 49ers defense needed a break. I think it was as simple as just giving those guys physiologically a break.
Shanahan actually said after the game that they had run the analytics on the new overtime rules.
Yeah.
And he had said that all week long that if they won the toss in overtime, they were going to take the ball first because because they wanted the third possession, which I was kind of feeling too in a game where both offenses had kind of found their groove late in the game.
Yeah.
That if, especially if you score a touchdown, that would have been fascinating if they had scored a touchdown, the 49ers, to see if the Chiefs came all the way back down the field. At that point, do you go for 2? Do you go for 2 and try to end it, or do you tie it and you kick the ball back to the Niners, who had been moving the ball on you at the end of regulation and in overtime?
Yeah.
Do you try to end it right there, or do you kick the ball back to them and hope that your defense can make a play and get off the field? That would have been a fascinating thing. But Shanahan had actually said that they would take the ball because they wanted the third possession. They wanted that first possession where you can end the game in overtime, which makes sense to me. I know Shanahan's taking a lot of heat today for taking the ball in overtime, and I totally understand the other view on it. It's worthy debate. Worthy debate. I had completely forgotten that both teams got the ball in overtime in the playoffs because I had.
Well, they changed it again. I don't know. Yeah, that's the explanations of the rules.
They changed it after that Bills-Chiefs game a few years ago.
The funniest thing about that, we came in with the final Kevin Harlan call on that play that ended up being the last play of the game. On the TV copy, Romo was, to an absurd degree, over-explaining why the Chiefs weren't in a hurry at the end of the game and or at the end of that quarter, that because it was overtime and because you're going to go on to a second quarter. He explained it 3 times. As Mahomes was coming up to the ball, Romo was still on his third explanation of why the game would continue on through into a second overtime quarter. Thanks, Romo.
Were you okay? This is a legitimate question for you because you and I exchanged texts about Romo as well. We've brought up Romo now. You brought up Romo twice in the opening segment. Were you able to enjoy this game?
I was. I thought Romo was. I actually thought he was pretty good for the most part. There's just times where he needs to shut up.
Yeah.
There's 2 times where he needs to shut up. One is in key and critical moments of the game when really we should be hearing Jim Nantz set everything up and bring the proper import to the moment.
Gravitas.
And 2 is like any kind of rules explanation. He's just got to shut the hell up. On that intentional grounding that probably shouldn't have been an intentional grounding, where Sterator and Nance wanted to discuss the fact that there very well was there was a potential receiver in the area. They showed a graphic of the tackle box, which is relevant on intentional grounding because Mahomes needed to it was outside the tackle box on that. But he started using it as a reason to talk about a disciplined pass rush, then complimented the 49ers for their disciplined pass rush, even though on that very specific play, Mahomes had gotten outside of the pass rush. And he just kept going. And then the other one on the reception, the use check reception, he tried to explain to Steratore the exact same thing Steratore had already said. That's where it gets obtrusive for me. I just think he gets in the way when the adults are trying to explain the rules.
Dude, that's the exact word that popped into my head. I'm like, Tony, let the adults talk.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
As Amy and I are watching it, I'm like, he just needs to shut up while there's still Steratore's there for a reason. He's there so Gene Steratore is there so you don't have to do this. He's the referee.
He did a good job, I thought, a couple times kind of explaining what he would do offensively. I liked that. And what was it? It was in the fourth quarter or so when he said that he felt like they should get back to using use check and using 21 personnel and all of that, in which they did, the 49ers did on the ensuing drive. So I thought that was good. He seemed to make a loose analogy, Sean, sometimes he sounds a little bit like a drunk person.
Yeah.
Making an analogy here, not
right,
accusing him of it.
Yep.
And sometimes he sounds like a sober person. I felt like I sounded like a sober person.
He was pretty sober last night.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
he sounded like a sober person.
Yes, he sounded like a sober person last night.